So it's CHISPA. We'll go ahead and say it all together now. CHISPA? Right? Okay. And chispa in Spanish means spark. And it's this idea that kids already have the spark and we want to help them light it up. And it would light up better if I knew how this presentation worked, because you can't see the slides before I start here. What do I do? Here we go. Here we go. Not touch screen. Thinking about it. And so I was here a couple years ago because you all helped sponsor a library. And so CHISPA works in libraries in Honduras. And even though we are a nonprofit in the United States, good thing you get my notes down there too. Oh no, it's to say what I'm saying. Okay. So we work in library projects in Honduras, and we provide a year-long program for kids so that it's not just putting in a library, it's helping train teachers, helping train parents, helping train students on how to use a book. So often this is helping get kids their first children's books, but also it's the first children's books often for teachers. One of the most common questions I get is, what methodology are you using? And we say, well, the 3-2 method. Right? 3 fingers in the back, 2 fingers in the front. Here's how you hold up in the book and show pictures. And that's for a lot of our teachers. They just aren't trained in children's books because the government, the university don't expect them to have children's books as a resource. And so you all helped sponsor this particular library with a fellow Rotary Club in Washington and with some Edwardsville families that went down and helped put in this library. So that's what happened a couple of years ago. And that helped get 16 teachers trained, 324 students get access to a library that had over 873 books. This is moving by itself. This is when you first met me. This is who we are now. We now live in St. Louis. We just moved back after being 9 years in Honduras. And so you can see, I think one of those was also in my tummy last time you saw me. So that's kind of fun. There we go. All right. So over the years, we've installed over 85 libraries now, over 62,000 books brought down thanks to folks like Clay and Jason at Market Basket who still help us get books down. They help donate space so that we can pack a pallet and send it down every year. And what I love most about Rotary is how well connected you are, how we use resources and connections as an asset instead of just thinking of money or just thinking of what we don't have, what we can't do. What the power of Rotary is how you all work together and how you think of how can we do something instead of, ooh, I can't do that, right? And so that's how CHISPA Project has also worked. We are a group of 8 people now. We started as a girl on a motorcycle, bringing books to kids where I could reach them. And that has grown into something so much bigger. And that's what Rotary does too. It's something so much bigger than the individual. So today I wanted to present to you in something a little different than I've presented in years past, which is just how the project works. But wanted to talk to you about how to maximize the impact of aid and what are things that we can do as folks working in social projects, as folks working in aid development. What are the little best practices that we can share and how do we collaborate among all of us to think about what works best when we're trying to create change or trying to help others outside of ourselves. And so where does it matter the most? It should matter to you as a Rotarian, right? Because Rotary Club really emphasizes those 4, right? Service above self, but asking these questions. How do we ask questions to help impact the best instead of just saying, this is what I think should happen for you over there, right? And so how do we as Rotarian, how do you all as Rotarians, how do we that work in aid think about not just the golden rule, what would I want to treat you as I would like to be treated, but let's take it a step further, the platinum rule, right? I want to treat you as you want to be treated because the way I want to be treated might be different, right? Than the way you think would be. And so trying to maximize how our impact happens in aid should matter to you as a Rotarian because you donate, you spend time, right? So how do we match our intent to our impact? What I intend to happen is actually happening on the other side, whether that be internationally or locally, just in a community outside of my own, or if I'm helping out at a local homeless shelter, right? How those folks want to be treated might be very differently than how I want to be treated, or things that need to happen in that space might be outside of what I know need to happen in that space. And so that's what I want to talk to you about, a couple lessons to learn to improve your impact, whether it's working with folks like CHISPA or in the daily projects that you all do here in Rotary. So number one, may seem kind of obvious, but define a clear mission. Often when I work with Rotary clubs or work with other organizations, it really takes a minute to sit down and think, what are our expectations, our goals, and our process? Instead of just jumping to, ooh, let's just do, usually those sentences, let's just do, end up with a girl going on a motorcycle, dropping off a backpack of books, coming back a year later, and the teacher opens the locked cupboard and says, look, I still have your beautiful books. You think, well, that wasn't the point, right? And so how do we get around this mind frame of, I just want to do this? And so it starts by putting in expectations, goals, and processes. The way we do that now in CHISPA project looks like providing expectations from the beginning. So making sure that the teachers, the students, the parents all understand what we expect from them and what they can expect from us, making sure everything's clearly written down. That includes in our goals that we make together. So it's not just us coming in and saying, you need this, but how do we, as folks that worked in aid, go into a place and set goals together, come alongside a community or someone different than ourselves and create goals together so that it is more lasting. And in CHISPA, we do this by signing a contract. You all do this a lot in Rotary too, with some of your global grants, with some of your district grants. How do you sign those goals to make sure those are very clearly followed? I got a donation this week that was from Germany. And the woman said, oh, I've got some money I want to send to the school. Can we send it through you and you help buy the school supplies? You know, just buy those school supplies. And I said, really, you don't just want to talk directly to them? No, we want to go through you. Okay. But when I called the school, because there was not clear expectations, the school had also heard that there was money coming. And they thought, ooh, you know, when you hear that someone's going to give you money, what do you first think? What's your first question? How much is it? Right? And so their thought was, you know, Sarah, maybe we can build a new building. Maybe we can, you know, put in some computers. And I was like, all right, guys, so the donation is $300. So let's bring it down, right? And so how do you create these clear written guidelines so that everyone's expectations can be met from the beginning? And then having a clear process. So one of the things, in order to get a library with CHISPA project, we invite communities to apply. And there's a pretty long selection process. We have a wait list of over 300 schools. How do you decide which of those schools get a library every year? Which one deserves it more than another one? And the best way that we can figure that out is trying to sit down with communities and say, okay, we've got a donation that's for, you know, this community, or we need this size school right now. And then we'll ask them, okay, you know, in order to get a library, you need to help paint. You need to help fix up the area that you want to use. You need to assign a committee that's going to work alongside with CHISPA to figure out what your policies are going to be. But that process helps then that schools can understand who can apply and why they get accepted. So the same thing goes for any project that you're doing or any aid that you're helping put out. Make sure there's a clear process so that there is accountability for why someone's accepted and there's equity in the process of not just our favorite cousin gets picked, right, or their school. Another great way to increase how your aid gets applied is through decentralizing leadership. And so as a very dynamic leader and a perfectionist, this is a little difficult sometimes. I have to give up some of that. But when we look at that in international aid, it looks like a sponsor, generally, for example, a Rotary Club, the intermediary, which in this case would be CHISPA, and then the beneficiary, which would be the local community, right? And how do we instead sit at a round table instead of someone coming to me and saying, Sarah, we would like this school to have a library, which happens all the time, right? Okay, and when we think, all right, great, you want this school to have a library. Does the school want the library? Does the school want to put in the work to do that library? And so how do we sit down and start decentralizing where the ideas are coming from? Top down is a lot of times how aid traditionally has been given. The same goes for, for CHISPA, for other organizations, for churches. We come up with great ideas for somebody else. But in the end, right, how do they want to be treated? So how do we get those ideas to come from the local community? And you see this in Rotary with the global grant, right? They have to do an assessment form to see what are the real needs and is this idea coming from the bottom up instead of us imposing. And so we do this in a couple different ways. I just talked about these 3 different people. So you do have these 3 different parts, right? And we want to make sure that instead of having that top making decision process, we are really including the beneficiary, which is a troublesome word. There's not a better word for it, but the beneficiary in the past in aid often looks like this, right? Give me, give me, give me. And that's where that begging mentality comes in. That's where the poverty mentality comes in. So how do we not perpetuate that? How do we talk about our beneficiaries or the local communities that you're working with as the experts in themselves, right? So we really over and over talk about this. You're the experts in your community. CHISPA is the expert in libraries. How do we come alongside to use our expertise together? And so without that local buy-in, without recognizing that the beneficiary is not just receiving, but they can also be a part of creating the project, this really helps with local buy-in and with that sustainability. And we want to do that. We want to include beneficiaries in 3 ways. So you've heard, and often projects have that side of labor, what's that word called? Where the community has to help put the labor, right? Self-help, but if there's something specific with labor, I can't remember. What? In-kind donation, but it's labor specific. They're what? No, that's okay. That's okay. No, and it's where you go in and you might pay for the house, but they have to build the house kind of thing, right? Sweat equity, thank you. Ding, 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 ding. Okay, now everyone will leave, right, if I have this. So sweat equity, and that's been a common thing in the past with aid, but now we really want to look at that in 3 parts. That there's not just that they need to come help with the project, but actually they need to help plan it, and they can put money towards it. So oftentimes we as the intermediary or as the sponsor for a program think, ooh, this community is so poor, really, we can't ask them to give any money. No, like you can, and it's important. And so actually 4% of every one of our library projects comes from the community itself. It's really important that a local community can help buy into a project literally. And we see this happen in some really great ways in Honduras. So 1, yeah, they need to show up for the labor. They need to come help install the library that we're putting in. I don't know why this is moving. They need to come help install it. They need to come help paint. They need to help create a committee that's going to help put those policies in. So the logistics, they're part of the planning every step of the way, right? It's not just me because every school looks different. And they also have to help fundraise. And the way we talk about that is, why it's moving. You go knock on your doors, I'll go knock on mine. And then when we sit down to talk about a project, a lot of times we'll see that communities are more willing to speak up for themselves because they're putting their money in it. So they don't want, something to happen the way the way that we might plan it. Because often when I come into a room, it's, have you thought about this? And for whatever reason, because of that money dynamic where I'm the giver, they're the receiver, they'll say, yes, Gringa, that sounds like a great idea. And then 5 days later, I leave and they change it, right? Because that actually doesn't work for them. But when they put their money in the project also, even though it's a symbolic portion of that money, we now see that people from the beginning are stepping up and saying, no, Gringa, that's not going to work here, right? And we really want that partnership. And so these three ways are really important for having that leadership together. And then the last part is choose the right partners. And so, of course, here I'm going to talk about the intermediary, right? But all of these parts are important. The same way that I'm looking for sponsors that really want to listen to what's happening on the ground. That when my local community gives pushback and says, you know, the sponsor told us to do it this way, but we really don't want to, that my sponsors listen. And so sometimes I have to say no to donors. Like, actually, we don't need that program right now. And the same goes for you as folks that sponsor, as folks that are helping put in projects in your local communities. You're always going to want to look for that local expert that helps you make the transition between cultures. Because the intermediary is the expert in the field, right? And they're the transparency and the bridge between, in this case, with CHISPA, international and local partners. And we have that dual cultural experience. This is where the transparency should come in. And this is where project details and implementation happen, because your intermediary knows both what you'd like to happen and what locals want to happen, and how to help lift up the local community to really direct the project. So I hope that you will consider these three things in how you pick and do projects in the future, whether it's locally or not. Because not only should we be experts in the field and location, right, and where we're working, but also, yeah, some of these things I've mentioned, have that transparency and be able to implement project details. As you can see, this is actually a reading fair that we're about to have, and that's the logistical planning that it takes to move 1,000 kids through a day-long fair. And when you have all these pieces in place, this is how we maximize aid, right? This is how we maximize donor dollars. This is how we maximize our efforts. This is how we, all of the intentions that we have for wanting to give kids books, this is how we make sure the impact is actually what we intended to happen. And it turns into a library that looks like this, or a library that looks like this, or this, or this, or this, because each library should come from the local community. And with all of that maximizing, with taking the fishes and the loaves, if you will, we've been able to do 62,000 books with a team of just now 8. We've trained over 1,000 teachers, and we've reached over 20,000 students. And that's just in the first year of the library. That doesn't count continuous years as the books continually are used after our first year of integrating a project. So I hope you'll keep these 3 things in mind when you move forward and are picking different projects. Define that clear mission, decentralized leadership. How do you work together and alongside communities? And choose the right partners and that have a good track record. And so moving forward, ways to connect. This is actually part of a bigger workshop that I do. So if you have a church or your Rotary Club international team would like a sit-down workshop where you talk through some of these concepts and think about how to apply this to your programs that you're already doing, I'm happy to do that for free. Because I love it, obviously. And then I have another Rotary Library project coming up in June, and I'm looking for volunteers. We've got some people from Edwardsville that have come down before. So I've got 2 groups coming down in June. If you are interested, please talk to me. I'll leave my card over here. But it's a great thing to bring your kids on, your grandkids on. I have a couple grandkids coming on those trips. My 3-year-old will be along. And you can also help sponsor that, and I'll be turning in a written request form to see if that's something your club would like to participate in. And then finally, spread the word. I just moved back to St. Louis after 9 years. So I'm looking to get connected with the local community. So if you can think of a way or another Rotary Club that would be interested in this, please let me know. Otherwise, thank you so much for your time. And I have a couple of minutes for questions. Yeah. The one in June will go in Tegucigalpa in the capital city, but we actually work around the country. And so the one we did a couple years ago was about 8 hours outside in Copan Ruinas. Average student size. Yeah, it's gone up as we've been able to get a bigger team. So I would say average size about 500 kids now. Some of our biggest schools are 1,000 kids. So yeah, getting good at it. And this year we'll do 7 library projects, so we'll reach an additional 4,000 kids this year in new libraries alone. Yeah. We actually buy most of our books because they are in Spanish. And so we've worked out with Scholastic and a couple different organizations to get those books at half price. But Spanish books are really hard to come by. So yeah, if you've got any ideas, usually we use about 10,000 books a year. And so that's why we ship and buy in bulk. Because each school does get a registration of all their books. So when you have an inventory of 2,000 books, we like to kind of make sure we have the titles we need. So yeah. Yeah, good question. All in Spanish.
Awesome. Yeah, don't leave yet. This is for you.
Thank you.
And Tosowski, the home nursery. Yeah, yeah.
Oh, that's so nice. And now I can actually take it home, not in my suitcase.
Exactly. There you go.
Thanks, guys.
Oh, that was a fantastic presentation. And Sarah, please join our club. These ideas that you have, we might use them for our big project next year. Talk to Dan. He's organizing the Centennial